to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's embroidery tutorial, we're doing another perfectly pieced box. This comes to us from Me Time Embroidery. Today we're doing December's box. You guys, I have a feeling this one's gonna be festive. So as always, thank you so much to Me Time Delivered for sponsoring today's video. I love these. This is a monthly subscription box. You have two options for the perfectly pieced box. You can have it delivered to your door in this beautiful orange box like I choose to, which gives you some fabric, it gives you some notions, it gives you some extras, usually some thread as well. Or you can subscribe and just get the digital files. So either way, you're going to get the digital files emailed to you, or you're gonna have some way to download them online on your account. But if you are just starting out with embroidery or sewing and you don't quite have a huge stash of fabric yet, this is a great opportunity because you're going to be able to month by month add to your stash. You don't need to use everything in the box for every month. You can definitely kind of pick and choose. That's what you'll see me doing today. I love this. I think this is fantastic for people just starting out, or those of us who are not just starting out. We've been doing this for a while, but we just like a little present every month. I love this. So although I have not opened this box yet, I did go online and I downloaded the embroidery file and I tested it out. It is so cute. Look at this, guys. So this is actually 4 of the blocks. So each one of these is 1 block. And so today I'm gonna run through how to make 1 block, but I wanted to show you when I put all 4 of them together, these are all just scraps of holiday fabric. And when you put all 4 of them together, how beautiful is that? I was kind of thinking of like putting it on a bag, but I think actually this, at the end of today's video, let's just put a back on it, sew it together, and make it as just like a little place setting. Like this would be perfect. You know what this would be perfect for? You put this on the table Christmas Eve and you put like Santa's cookie plate on it. I mean, that's beautiful. Or you can put like some hot cocoa on top of it, some cookies. It's just a beautiful little accent to your holiday table, but it's something you could use all year round. Of course, it's just depending on your fabric. I especially love this block this month because this really takes advantage of making a quilt block on an embroidery machine, which I know is still kind of like to a lot of us, right? Where it's like, well, I'm a quilter. Why would I need an embroidery machine to make a quilt block? Do you see how skinny some of these cuts here are? That would be a nightmare to piece together if you're just piecing it by like cutting a 1/2-inch strip of fabric to make these perfectly straight little lines. I mean, look at this. These corners match up perfectly. The lines are the perfect width. Everything about this block is just perfect. So that would be a very challenging thing to do with just small cuts of fabric and then piecing it at the sewing machine, you know, with your scant 1/4-inch seam allowance. That would be challenging. So an embroidery machine actually makes this very easy, very quick. I just busted these out yesterday afternoon while I was working on something else. And like, it looks like I took all day to make it, and I did not take all day to make this. So if you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, anything at all, any ideas you have for like different ways to do this block or different things to use with these blocks, leave them down in the comments section. This is a fun block because you'll see the way you rotate these blocks totally changes up the look of this. I mean, you'll see. It's so cool. I will have timestamps down below. This should be a very quick video. These blocks come together so fast. They're so fun, but we're gonna unbox this month's box and then we're gonna go through how to make one of these, and then we'll put together a little itty bitty tutorial at the end on just how I kind of put a backing on this and make this into something special for the holidays. All right, guys, let's get started. So let's just dive right into this month's box. You can see we have perfectly pieced December. Again, you guys, I love these boxes. They're so well made. They're so nice. We keep the boxes. We use them for storage. I love them. So this is the December 2022. Looks like we have some clear blue tiles. I am still embarrassed to say I have not played with these and mastered them just yet. I hear they're extremely useful at quilting things once you've got it figured out. I just haven't taken the time to figure it out, but I will. But you've got clear blue tiles, so you can add that to your collection. Ooh, what's this little cutie patootie here? Aw, this looks like it's a little bobbin holder. Oh, I love these. So you put all your bobbins in here so they're not flying around and the threads going everywhere all over the sewing room. I love that, especially with embroidery. Depending on the type of machine you have, you can have a lot of different colors of bobbins. So if you want to have like all these different bobbin colors here, so whenever you're quilting something, you have the perfect color for the backing. Oh man, I love that. This is so handy. Next up, we have the thread. I love getting this thread every single month. This is glide thread. It is fantastic for embroidery machines. I just love it. This is color nickel. So pretty. Oh my gosh, look at the colors this month, you guys. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's see what the card says. It says perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. You can square your blocks with a quilting ruler or Kimberbell orange pop rulers. Very cool. Nice little handy tip. Let's open up this fabric. It's just so pretty. You guys, you know this is my favorite part every single month. I love these colors. Ooh, look at this. It has like a little swirly whirly design on it, so it gives it like a texture, which is really pretty. Oh my gosh, I love this. This like is like my husband's color palette. This is speaking Derek. Ooh, I love this solid. Look at both of these solids. These are beautiful neutrals to go with anything. Again, keep these scraps. You don't have to use all of it in today's video. And then we have a beautiful navy. And then these are like little wings. Those are pretty. And then again, more swirly whirlies. So you'll notice there's a lot of different cut sizes here. This is so you have enough material to do your projects. You might have some smaller cut sizes that are supposed to be used really just for the blocks. And then you'll have bigger cut sizes like this one, which could be used for backing. They could be used for pillows, for, I think the pattern for this month that they're really talking about is this awesome little neck scarf. So you have a lot of options to play with here. And don't forget, you can also incorporate material you have in your own stash with these to make it really unique. Okay, the printout is always nice. So the printout is going to show you exactly what number everything is. So when you look at your cut list on the back, you can see like, okay, cut number 1 is for this spot. So I want to use this fabric for this spot and this fabric for this spot. So this lays it all out, and it kind of gives you an example of each block size. Remember, you can make a 2, 4, 6, or 8 inch block. Today we're going to be making the 4 inch block because that's kind of my favorite block size to go with, especially since I'm using a single needle, smaller embroidery machine. I can't make the 6 or 8 inch on this specific machine. And I also want to show you that this gives you orientation ideas. So you can see, depending on how you put these blocks together, they're going to make totally different designs, which I think is so cool. I mean, look at this. This one almost looks like a ribbon wrapping around itself. So cool. So let's go over the stuff I'm going to be using today. A tiny iron. I love this little Cricut iron. It's just so small. It's perfect, especially for these smaller blocks that we're making or on these smaller hoops. You do need to be able to iron the block as you're working with it. That is actually very important. You do not want to use a giant iron that's just going to melt everything. You know, it's going to melt the stabilizer. It can actually melt your frame. So this small iron, definitely a good investment. You'll use it for everything. It's just a standard sewing room must-have in my opinion. I'm switching up the stabilizer today. Kimberbell sent me some ultralight mesh cutaway, which is what they do suggest you use for these blocks. And I'll be honest, I used this for the last 4 blocks I made when testing this out, and this stuff is awesome. It's very light, but it's not stretchy. You don't have to worry about it ripping. I'll tell you the other stabilizer I've been using with these blocks, I have to be very careful when I insert it into my hoops because if I tug on it too much, it just rips. And it actually rips a lot of times while we're stitching on it. And I didn't have any problems with this. So highly recommend this. This is great stabilizer. Since I'm making the 4 inch block, I need a hoop that is bigger than that. The 4 inch hoop will not accommodate that. So I have a 5 inch by 7 inch hoop, which will fit my 4 inch by 4 inch block. I have the thread that they sent, but Glide thread is fantastic for embroidery. I do recommend that. I have a small cut of batting. This can just be some leftover batting that you've used for a quilt. So if you're working on a quilt right now and you have some scraps, just hold on to those because you can definitely use those for a new quilt with these blocks because you kind of quilt as you go, which is so cool. You don't have to quilt the whole thing in the end. So a small cut, this size is going to be dependent on the size of the block you're making. As always, again, an embroidery must have these curved scissors. This is how if you're going to do applique, you definitely have to have these. But these are just really handy because with embroidery, we have this frame, so we have some stuff sticking up and we have to cut down. And with straight scissors, you end up jamming it right through your material, right through the stabilizer. So with curved scissors, it just makes it so much easier to work. And then for the bobbin, because my bobbin is almost out and I'm going to have to replace it anyways, I figured I would show you. I like to use Superior Threads bottom line. This is what I like to use in the machine I'm using today. I do have to wind my own bobbin and put it in there. I cannot use a pre-wound bobbin. If your machine allows you to use pre-wound bobbins, especially the magnetic pre-wound bobbins, use those because the tension on them is already perfect. When you wind your own bobbin, you do run the risk of the tension not being quite right, and let me just tell you, that is a headache when the tension is off in an embroidery machine. And speaking of embroidery machines, I am once again going to be using the Brother PE800. This is a fantastic beginner embroidery machine. You can see thread goes up here, everything. It is so easy to work with. There's no bells and bobs and whistles. There's nothing to worry about with this thing. You just pretty much turn it on and get it going, and it works. I have many different embroidery machines, and I have spent many hours sitting on the floor crying because I couldn't get them to work the way I needed them to work, and I've never had that problem with this machine at all. So if you are just starting out, you're thinking about getting an embroidery machine, this is one of the most affordable ones, and it's just fantastic. Again, as somebody who has multiple embroidery machines, this is still my go-to. If I can't do what I need to do on this one, then I enlist the help of the other ones. Otherwise, this is what I use 90% of the time. So now let's look at a photo of our block and the fabric we have and figure out how we want to line this up. You know how I am. You can definitely make the block exactly like it is in the picture, which is beautiful. They did the work for you. But I always have to be different. I can't do that block because that block's already been done. So let me go through this. I will tell you cuts 2, 4, 6, and 8 are all the same color if you want that like ribbon, you know, look, that really skinny look. So I think for those ones, I'm actually going to use the navy because they went light, so I'm going to go dark. So for the 2, 4, 6, 8 skinny cuts, I'm going to use this dark navy color. For cut 1, which is the biggest cut on top, I'm going to use my swirly whirlies. Cut 2, I'm going to use this kind of taupe. So let's see, so I'm going to do 1, 2. And then for cut 5, which is this little bit over here, I'm going to use a darker blue. And then for cut 7, which is this big stripe across, I'm going to use my flowers because that's beautiful. And then for the last one, I'm going to use this light blue. There we go. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8 here, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. All right, so now I'm just going to use the cutting instructions on the back of this and cut all of these out according to how big those suggest for the 4-inch block. So once I have all my pieces cut out, I like to layer them just like this, especially if I'm making a whole bunch of these blocks, but I have to make them one at a time. Stacking each one up like this makes it so much easier. So first I put my batting cut down, and then I grab piece number 1, and I like to lay it right side down on top of that, and then piece number 2, and then piece 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it's all stacked up in order, and then I just flip this over and I'll stack up all of my blocks, and that way I just one by one put down the batting, put down the next thing, and after you make one of these blocks, you don't have to keep referring to the pattern. You'll just know what comes next and where it goes, and it just makes it very quick. So let's get our hoop set up. So I always just like to unroll my stabilizer, take the larger part of the hoop, so if you separate them, take the larger outer ring of the hoop and use that, and then just slice this down. It just needs to be bigger than the hoop. And then I lay my stabilizer over the bigger part of the hoop, and then take the inner hoop and just tuck it right in there. And this is great because if you need to pull on the stabilizer, you can. My other stabilizer I've been using, you could not do that. If you pulled on it, it would rip, which is fine. It works. But this is definitely easier to work with. So as you can see, I have a red thread already installed in here. I'm going to keep that red thread because it is very easy to see on the stabilizer. I feel like this beautiful gray thread will be more difficult to see. So I'm going to keep the red thread, but I will use the gray thread whenever I do the embroidery at the end. All right, so I already have the embroidery file loaded up on my machine. You can see the photos all ready to go. My hoop size is correct. I can't use any of the smaller hoops because of the size of the block. So now I'm just going to install my hoop into the machine. And this first step is going to provide placement for our batting. So we don't have any material on the stabilizer at all yet. We are only stitching on the stabilizer. Once that's stitched down, grab your batting cut and lay your batting over that entire square. So this should completely cover the stitching. If you need to use some tape to hold this in place, go ahead and do that. The next step is going to stitch down the batting in place. So this is a tack down stitch to make sure the batting does not go anywhere. So now we're going to remove this from the machine and we're going to trim down the batting. So you can see I have all this extra batting over here. So all I do is lift it up and carefully trim. I will tell you it is pretty easy to accidentally cut your thread here, so it doesn't have to be right against the thread. You can see I leave a bit of a mess outside of the thread area, which is fine. We don't want to cut the thread and then risk the batting kind of rolling up and becoming a problem later. But you see why these curved scissors are so nice? Because this little lip here, it can be difficult to cut around with straight scissors. So now we're going to put our hoop back in the embroidery machine and we're going to stitch down the placement lines for everything that we're going to be using. So this is just going to be placement lines to help us place all of our quilt block material throughout the entire building process. Once all those placement lines are stitched down, we're going to now just add each block one at a time. So block number 1 is for this large triangle at the top, and this is the only piece of material you lay down right side up. So it needs to completely cover the top, the very, very top straight edge, as well as the full triangle all the way down to the point. So it's not hard to do. Your block should be plenty big for that, but you see how it completely covers most of the top half, but just don't let it hang below this top stitch line. This very, very top line that's only on the stabilizer, it's not on any batting, that is part of your block. So you want to make sure it covers that as well. Again, if you want to use tape, you can definitely do that. But now we're going to go stitch this down. So this line is going to be stitching down block number 1. It's also going to be placement line for block number 2. Once you have that stitched, you're going to remove the hoop from your machine, lift up this bottom left triangle here, and just hold it straight up, and use your scissors to cut right next to that stitch line. There you go. Now grab block 2 and lay it right side down, and it's going to go right side against the right side of block 1, lining it up completely with that stitch line. Don't let it be too low or too high. The fabric needs to cover the entire stitch line. We're just lining it up on that edge. And now we're going to put this back in the machine, and we're going to stitch fabric piece 2 in place. Once you have that stitched down, you're going to fold fabric piece 2 right side up and just finger press it right along that stitch line first. Then grab your teeny tiny iron and only iron on that line. It's just for a moment. You don't have to hold it there for long, and try not to let your iron touch the stabilizer, especially if you're using like a plasticky stabilizer, because it will melt. So now we're going to put this back in the machine, and it's going to stitch down the other edge of fabric piece 2, which is also going to be our placement line for fabric number 3. Once you have that stitched down, lift up the remaining edge to the left of the stitch line on fabric 2 and trim this down. This becomes a very skinny piece of material. There we go. Now take your fabric cut number 3 and lay it right side down, right sides together with fabric 2, once again lining it up with that full stitch line, and we're going to stitch this in place. Once you have fabric 3 stitched down, fold it so it's right side up, just like that, and then press right along that seam. You can see, do you see how skinny that is? Oh, it looks so good. So now we're going to put this back in the machine, and we're going to stitch down the other side of fabric number 3, which is going to be placement for fabric number 4. Now remove the hoop from the machine, and we're going to trim right next to the stitching. You don't have to trim all the way off. So you see how there's a bunch of material over here. You can just trim to the edge of the stitching and then lift up the bit you've already trimmed and cut it like that. However you want. It's just if you keep trimming, you might accidentally go a little off the rails. So I like to just trim where the stitching is. So now I'm going to grab fabric piece number 4, and I'm going to lay that right side down on top of fabric number 3, covering the full stitch line. And we're going to stitch down fabric piece 4. And now flip fabric piece 4 right side up and press right along that seam. There we go. Okay, back in the machine to stitch down the other side of fabric piece number 4, which is also placement for fabric piece number 5. All right, now to the left of that stitch line, lift up that little bit of fabric piece 4 and trim it down. It's always important to keep trimming this down, because if you don't, especially with such skinny little bits we have here, you're going to add a lot of layers. That's going to get bulky, and it could end up messing up the design. It could break a needle. There's a lot of headaches. So just always take the time to trim it down. Now we're going to grab piece 5, and we're going to lay that right side down on top of the other blocks. And then once again, just making sure it lines up with the stitch line, and let's stitch down piece number 5. And then fold that teeny tiny piece number 5 right side up and press along the seam. All right, that's looking fantastic. So now make sure everything is nice and flat, because the next stitch is going to go right along the diagonal of the block, going across the bottom of all the pieces you've already sewn. Once you have that stitched down, take this big piece of the triangle, this bottom right triangle over here from piece number 1, and just trim it down. So now take piece number 6, and we're going to lay it right side down, running across all of the previous blocks, and line it up completely with that stitch line. If you have a little bit of wrinkles, you might want to press it, because we do not want this piece moving around on us. And now let's stitch down piece 6. Now let's flip piece 6 right side up. Can you see it coming together yet? You see all these little lines? These blocks, they can be difficult to really see until the very end when we trim them down. So you'll see, it looks great. So now we're going to stitch down the other side of piece number 6, which is also our placement line for piece 7. And now this bottom overhang from piece number 6, go ahead and lift that up and trim it off. Now grab piece number 7 and lay that right side down on top of piece 6. As always, lining it up with the stitching, which is why it's important to be able to see your thread. And now let's stitch down piece 7. Now flip block 7 right side up, press along that long line, and then press it with your iron as well. Oh, this is looking so good. So now we're going to stitch down the other side of block 7, which is also placement for block 8. So once again, I'm only going to trim down where the stitching is. So I'm going to lift this up and I trim into the edge, so perpendicular to the raw edge, and then I'm going to trim right along the stitching. And then on the other side, once again, perpendicular to the raw edge, perpendicular to the stitching, and then just lift it up. So you see I have like a little pocket here now. I'm going to grab cut number 8 and lay that right side down along the stitching. And now we're going to sew down block 8. Now let's flip block 8 right side up and press right along the seam. Okay, now we're going to stitch down the other side of block 8, which is also placement for our final block, number 9. Just like I did before, I'm going to lift up the fabric and I'm going to cut right along the stitch line, but I'm not cutting farther than it. That's just because I have a tendency to not be able to cut a straight line, and if I try to just continue cutting off the edge, I'll end up loop it. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what's going to happen? So now we're going to take fabric number 9 and lay it right side down. This is our last cut. Make sure it lines up with the stitching. And now let's stitch down fabric piece number 9. And finally, flip fabric number 9 right side up. Press it with your fingers first. And then grab your tiny iron and give it a good press. And let's just make sure the whole area is nice and flat. There we go. So now I'm going to switch out my thread color to this beautiful gray because the next 2 steps are going to be just tacking down the full square, which you can then end if you decide you want to quilt this yourself later. But then the step after that's actually going to be a quilting step. So if you don't want to quilt this later and you want to just have the machine do it for you now, then you can do that. All right, the thread has been switched out. So now we're going to just stitch down the full square, which ends up being 4.5 by 4.5 inches. And now this step is optional, but I do really like it. The quilting on this looks really beautiful. We're going to quilt the block, which is just a series of really nice straight lines. So once that's done, go ahead and take your block out of the hoop. And so my block, when cut down to size, is going to be 4.5 by 4.5 inches. And if you're like, but I thought it was a 4-inch by 4-inch block, you have to remember we have seam allowances. So the measurement is accounting for a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. So that's going to add a 1/4 inch to the left, to the right, to the top, to the bottom. So the full size of the block when we cut it is 4.5 by 4.5, which should be this very outer stitch line. That should be 4.5 by 4.5. But I like to use a little quilt ruler and just line it up with that stitch line. And that allows me to measure out 4.5 by 4.5. So I have my 4.5 mark here on the left, my 4.5 mark here on the bottom, and now I'm going to cut on the right and on the top. So by doing that, I now have a nice right angle here, so I can rotate the block and then line up my 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch marks on my quilt ruler. And now I'm going to once again cut the left and the top. And to finish, I have this beautiful little 4.5 inch by 4.5 inch block. And look how beautiful that is. I mean, look, I love that. Look at those dark contrasts. Can you imagine a whole bunch of these? This would make a beautiful design, right? However you lay it out, this is going to be beautiful. I love the colors we picked for this. Okay, so I want to show you one of the easiest things you can do with these once you're done. So let's say you made a few of these blocks, you sewed it together, and you're like, it's so pretty, I just want to use it right now. Well, you can definitely do that. If you sew 4 of these blocks together, just like I did, this square is now 8.5 by 8.5 inches. So I went ahead and cut another piece of material. This is just quilt cotton that is also 8.5 by 8.5 inches. Now, you can add interfacing to this. You could add a thermal batting to this so it can be used for hot plates. You can take both of these wrong sides together just like this, baste them together in some way, maybe with some glue adhesive, and then stitch together like that and then add binding, or probably the easiest and quickest way. Take both of these panels and lay them right sides together. Grab some clips and just clip along all 4 edges, making sure they're all lined up. Now I'm going to grab an air erasing marker and I'm going to mark a little 4-inch, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, a little 4, maybe 3.5 to 4 inch opening on one side, just like that. So now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew along all 4 edges except this opening at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to backstitch at the opening, beginning and end, and I'm not stitching here because I'm going to turn everything out through this in just a moment. Once you have these stitched together, you can just ever so gently cut off the corners. You don't have to cut super close to the thread. Just cut them off a little bit so they're not bulky. And now let's turn this right side out through that hole we left. Be gentle, especially if you're not using interfacing on the other piece like me. You can rip that fabric. The fabric will rip sooner than the thread will rip. So now just put your fingers inside and poke out those corners. Oh yeah, this is looking so cute. So now you see you have this. And if you want, you could actually stuff this with some polyfill stuffing and create like a little Christmas pillow, which would be very cute. If you do that, you're gonna probably wanna hand sew it closed. I am going to just go around the edge so you can see, because my top piece here is a lot thicker than my bottom piece, the seam wants to do something like this, which you might think looks good, except it can't do that everywhere because of, you know, the size of everything. So what we want to do is we want to roll it back so that the seam is just perfectly flat. And I'm going to grab some clips here and clip this together. Now you don't have to do this. You can just stitch this opening closed and be done if you'd like. But if you want a little extra work, you can top stitch this, but you do have to be careful because right here on the middle of the edges, that can break a needle. You have a lot of layers there. So top stitching, you gotta be careful in those spots. When I get to the opening here, I can just kind of push my fingers into the corners and roll the fabric down. So the backing fabric will roll down easy. The fabric that's around the design, you're gonna wanna kind of hug it around the batting. So you can feel the batting is shorter than the material and you just wanna hug it around there. All right, now I'm going to gently go around all 4 edges at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, top stitching everything in place. Like I said, if you just don't want to do that, you can just top stitch this opening. No one's going to notice. All right, there we go. One of the easiest mini quilts you'll ever make. And now you can see there's nothing on the back here, so what you could do is just kind of follow these ditches. So it's called stitching in the ditch. It's where you keep the needle right in the seam. You could do that, add a little extra quilting if you'd like. This to me is fine. I think this would be beautiful. I'll put it on my kitchen table. We'll put our cookie plate for Santa, or even if it's just for me, you know, I'll just put like this could be like a little cookie and mug rug. So I'll put my coffee cup on here and maybe a couple cookies, you know. It's the season. It's the season for cookies on everything, right? How cute are these? And so like I said, you see how when you put it together, I mean, this is such an easy little project, right? You just throw 4 of these together, put a piece of fabric on the back, there you go. And now you have a cheerful little place setting for your hot chocolate and your cookies, or if you're me, for your coffee and your rum balls. So I hope that you love making these. I can't wait to see what you guys do with this block this month. Every month is so fun. I especially love the months of Perfectly Pieced, where we really get to utilize using the embroidery machine. And you get to see why using an embroidery machine with the quilt block is so helpful. There are other ways to make blocks like this without an embroidery machine, but you might require some sort of paper, or you're gonna really have to be careful with these long skinny strips of fabric. I mean, I've worked with skinny strips of fabric and quilt blocks before, and it is not easy. So this is definitely a lot easier. And look how it's just perfect. It's just perfect. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Thank you again to Perfectly Pieced for sponsoring today's video. If you have any questions or anything like that, leave them down in the comment section down below. I will have a link as well for you to go sign up for the Perfectly Pieced box if you'd like. It's a new box every single month, and it is really fun. It's really fun to see what fabrics they have, what thread they have, and what the pattern is. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.